Hello again, Dan Alasso with History for Today. I'm probably going to make a new set of videos introducing my students to Hypothesis as part of my note-taking series for this spring semester that's coming up. But in the meantime, I thought that I would respond to a question that I had from another educator that was based on a previous video that I made. Adrian Norman of James Cook University in Cairn, Australia, emailed me yesterday and asked me if I have a workaround for the saturation that seems to happen after lots and lots of people annotate a document publicly. This happens when an HTML-based web document, such as a web page or an ebook, is used by a lot of people. Personally, I often find this a very useful feature of Hypothesis. It's very cool for me to be able to see what other people have thought of major documents on the web. And I've used publicly annotated versions of OER textbooks, for example, to determine, based on student responses, which parts are working for them and which could be improved. I've had good results from looking at annotations of other ebooks that I've been interested in adapting or adopting parts of or remixing, such as The American Yop, and also my own ebooks. There's a podcast about that, actually, from very early when I was just beginning podcasting, and I wanted to talk about my remix of the first chapter of The American Yop. There was also a public annotation project and event a couple of years ago about one of the early foundational documents of the computer age, Doug Engelbart's Augmenting Human Intelligence, a Conceptual Framework, which was written actually in the year of my birth, 1962. The thoughts that people came up with and the online discussion were really fascinating to me. And I actually had my students in my History of High Tech class a couple of years ago read it. And I showed them in that process where the publicly annotated document was, as a demonstration of how cool it can be to be involved in this type of social annotation project. But I also made a private annotation group for that class so that they could have their own discussion in relative private, without computer science professionals and theorists being involved, and also in a safer space. There are several advantages to creating a private annotation group for each class. It makes it possible for the students to really test out their ideas in a less risky environment. I think my personal tolerance for looking stupid online is fairly high. You can see that in my history of blogging since the last century and the fact that I'm now making these YouTube videos and podcasts. Some of my students are also sort of real-life digital natives who are happily using apps like Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok to give their friends and even strangers intimate looks into their lives. But I can also understand how an undergraduate who values her privacy might not feel entirely comfortable putting her first impressions of a course reading or an important document out on the web for everybody to see forever. Also, I'd like to be able to recognize who is talking in my class discussions. So I encourage my students to use their own names. So to avoid legal and other ethical privacy issues, I create a private course group for each of my sections. This also helps students to focus on each other's comments rather than those of experts or professionals or other random people throughout the world who might be annotating the document. Part of my instructions actually in a typical annotation assignment is that the students should make 5 original comments on the text and then respond to 3 of the comments of their classmates. So it's important for them to be able to see just the annotations of their classmates. And the idea is that this jumpstarts the conversation for discussion day. And as I begin moving to a hybrid, flexible, or a high-flex class format this spring, which will be mode neutral and will try to create equivalent learning experiences across in-person, remote synchronous, and online asynchronous modes, I think that this social annotation will only become more useful and more important. The way that I create these private groups is through the drop-down menu in Hypothesis, which you've been watching as I've been talking. I then put an invitation to the private group in my course shell in the learning management system, and then also in an email to students, along with a video that explains to them how to set up their own Hypothesis account. It generally takes a few reminders to make sure that students are annotating within the course group and not out in public, but they catch on pretty quickly. I'm actually considering adding a layer where students will, in addition to annotating, also write short summaries of articles and even short essays, which was the technique that I used before social annotation became available. But I'm also going to continue using this social annotation as the first step in a process that I'll teach my students to take their reading assignments and turn them into analysis and ultimately into their own written output. So that is sort of how it fits into my process and what I'm planning on teaching. I hope people found that interesting. Thanks for listening. I'll have more to say about Hypothesis in the near future. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next time.